Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Welcome to the Clarity Advisors Show. Hey, have you wondered about starting a business, but were concerned that you didn't know how to transition from just you to a bigger team? Well, my guest today has founded 3 startups, the largest of which has over 100 team members. And he's also started a venture during the pandemic. He's also an active investor in a number of other business ventures. He's a learner, a listener, and today he's going to share some wisdom. Welcome, my good friend, Garry VonMyhr.
Hey, Ken, thanks so much for having me on. Excited
Yeah,
to be
great
here.
to have you, Garry. Appreciate that. So let's just start with a little bit of your background. How did you get into some of these ventures? Tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sort of stumbled upon entrepreneurship. A friend of mine in high school had an idea to start fixing cell phones on the side. And this was back in 2006, going into 2007, 8, and 9. Him and I were at Grand Valley together, and he kind of came to me with this idea. And it was a business, but it was a really small business that he's operating out of his house. And I partnered with him. His name's Jordan Notenbaum, and probably hear me talk about my original partners, Jordan Notenbaum and C. Barnes, quite a bit. But he came to me with this idea, and him and I partnered up together, and it really took off very quickly for us. It was great timing in the market, but
Sure.
just really fell in love with creating my own business, controlling my own destiny, and kind of really being able to, in a way, disrupt and change a market. So kind of stumbled upon it a little bit there, and realized I was really wired to be an entrepreneur for a long time, but didn't really see the signs, didn't really have, anybody in my family or my life that was an entrepreneur to kind of show me that path. So it took me a little while, late in college until I finally realized it. And it was actually a friend that really got me in on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So tell me about a couple of the ventures. The first one being Tech Defenders, obviously the biggest and kind of longest running thing you've been doing. How did you transition from just the 3 of you to what's now over 150 people, or I'm sorry, 100 people, 8 years into it? Talk about that transition a little bit and what you've learned about building teams over that time.
Yeah, sure. So, really that small business that I was just talking about there led to us starting Genius Phone Repair, which was our, first venture. And we had 18 retail cell phone repair locations throughout Michigan and then northern Indiana. And that business led to Tech Defenders, actually.
Okay.
So Genius Phone Repair, we started doing some repair work for school districts. I remember Zeeland Public Schools was one of our first schools. We started to kind of do like a milk run for them, where we were fixing their broken iPads, dropping them off, and then picking up another round of broken iPads from them pretty much weekly. They had a really large fleet, several thousand of these devices. Right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of what led us into working with schools. And then as soon as we started seeing the opportunity with schools, our mind was kind of blown, and how many schools were going to start to get these devices and deploy them out in the classrooms. And we were pretty early to the market at that point in time. And so I remember seeing and reading several articles about how many schools were getting, iPads and MacBooks, and we're like, geez, these students are really going to break those devices pretty often, right? So we had, some dollar signs in our eyes a bit there.
Yeah.
About looking to capture that market. And so that kind of led us into the Tech Defender side of things. And so from there, we just started, branching off, building a brand to really go after those school districts, creating a whole new, strategy for that. You'll hear me talk a little bit about EOS probably today, but I wish I would have had EOS and be able to create a clear vision for this separate business and totally separate market back then. But we definitely branched it off, created a bit of a strategy, and hired a team to start selling on these school districts. It was just great timing in the market, I would say too, right? We saw the opportunity, but it was, fantastic timing for us to jump in there. So that's kind of how Tech Defenders got started.
Okay. Yeah. So take me back to the Genius Phone Repair. 18 locations. That sounds like 18 store manager, 18 small teams. Talk about how you built that and thought about that, and maybe some of the challenges and lessons learned.
Yeah. So finding a good store manager to run our stores was literally like the key to success
Sure.
for us in those stores. The stores that did really well, as you could imagine, had really great managers, and the stores that didn't perform as well had mediocre managers. And it was super difficult for us. Now that, this is back in 2011, 2012. So the economy wasn't in as good of a position back then. And so I felt like it was a little bit easier to find talent then than it is now. But, our strategy was really to, immerse people in our culture and then really train them up and coach them up as quick as we can to be those store managers. So we didn't look outside as much for store managers that had prior experience. We really wanted people to grow from within in the business, be immersed in our culture, get that hustle, that grind that we were looking for, and then try to coach them up on the fly. But what that required is it put a lot of pressure on my district managers.
Okay.
And so, if you think about 18 stores, you got a store manager in each store, you need, a couple really good district managers to really oversee those. We had, 2, and we had phenomenal ones. They were really good assets for us, really solid leaders with great experience that could help pour into and kind of actively coach. There's a lot of different strategies we could have gone. We could have looked to hire good store managers, paid them more, with experience, but we went with a little bit less experience and just had that kind of farm system that we had built over time and really relied on our district managers to help get them up to speed. So that was kind of the strategy that we deployed. But keep in mind, this is my first business, so we're kind of like deploying that on the fly, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, but it did. I actually felt like it actually worked out really well. So,
all right. Yeah. Well, so, and I'm curious too about the age differences. We've got a lot of generations in the workplace right now, and there's a lot of talk about the difference between the generations. So coming out of school, starting up Genius, you guys are early 20s, mid 20s, right? And tell me about the kind of, the difference. How do young guys like you coach up either people like yourselves, in their 20s, or maybe it was folks that were a little bit older in 30s and 40s as these store managers and some of the technicians in the stores? Talk about that dynamic a little bit and what you learned as a young leader, figuring this stuff out, like you say, kind of on the fly.
Yeah, I think, it was always a little bit more difficult for me, especially early on, to oversee people that were a little bit older than me, or a couple generations older. And I definitely made some mistakes along the way. I'll tell you that.
Well, so
no doubt there.
Give me one. People love to hear the stories.
Let me think back, I guess, to a specific time, but I think I was just very, I guess, quite a bit more timid when it would be an experienced manager. And I put a lot of, I was a lot more hands off. I guess I changed my style of managing quite a bit with somebody that was older and more experienced. In a lot of ways, that's a good thing, but not for everyone, right? So I would be a little bit more hands off in those scenarios, certainly, and I still am. If somebody's got really good experience and they've been there and done that before, I'm gonna typically give them the runway that they deserve and let them go. Other times, people still need active managing, even though they've been there and done that before. And so I think I, kind of fell in the trap of just assuming, they've got it. They've been here, done that a million times. They know how to manage and lead. They're going to pick this thing up really quick, instead of really, I guess kind of diving in, doing some one-on-one coaching, understand where the strengths and weaknesses are, and playing to that more than just assuming based on experience or age that they've kind of got it all figured out.
Yeah. Now I know you're a fan of process, and we'll come back to that, but for now, for the process of training and coaching and getting people, so that I'm assuming you wanted repeatability in the stores, that whether I walked into one Genius or a different Genius, I got kind of that same experience as a customer. So how did you do that? What was the system or the process that you tried to put in place to grow those teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. And looking back, it's kind of interesting. Some of my first initial training in managerial programs were really good, and I've struggled to repeat them now in my future businesses. Ironically, now I had some really good people to help me in those, but with Genius, it was pretty, I was the first customer service rep, right? My partner Jordan was the first technician. So if you would have came into one of our stores back in 2011, you probably would have came and saw me and then Jordan in the back, or actually my other partner, Steve, that ended up coming on later on. He would have been the one to fix the devices, right? So we knew it inside and out. We knew that business really well. And so it's very powerful when you have a business owner that knows even the basics. And so we were able to build a really robust training program. Think of a small business, a lot of people just learn right on the fly, but pretty quickly we built this really in-depth training program. We had it as 2 weeks and we ended up trimming it back to be a week long. And then we created a, really like a full manual, kind of like really like a franchise group would create a manual for operating. And we had pretty big goals for growing the business. And so we created this, huge intranet and manual and reference point that we had. So, and everything got documented. If we changed a system or process, we updated that intranet and it would get rolled out weekly. And that thing was like the, kind of like the Bible of how we're going to operate the company. And we had somebody that managed it for us. It's almost a full-time job, training and managing that, intranet manual that we had. So I think that was really, those are a few kind of key points. Just I guess kind of recap really quick there. We knew our stuff as, partners from the ground up, right? And how to operate the business. We documented it. We had good leaders and then kind of a good deployment program as well to help deploy those tactics and stayed consistent with it as well. Like it was like, if we made a change, like that change isn't going in place until the weekly manager meeting where the managers can see that firsthand, learn about it, poke holes in it, and then deploy it down to the team. So we had a really good regimen and schedule for deploying that.
Yeah. It sounds like a nice move to get some buy-in too, to bring that to those managers, to let them bring it down to their team.
Exactly.
That's great stuff. So transition us now into Tech Defender. So what happened with Genius? And then, because Tech Defenders is rather than 18 small locations, it's one big place, right?
Right.
So talk about the transition there, and then a little bit about that team currently.
Yeah. So Genius, we were growing and doing really well for a number of years, but the industry started to get pretty competitive, and we got to a point where we said, we think our resources and time is going to be spent a little bit, better on this B2B side that we, kind of I talked about earlier, seeing a big opportunity in the education space, right? And so, keep in mind too, with the phone repair locations, it's not too difficult to fix your phone. A lot of people were able to pop up these, Ken's iPhone repair type locations fairly easily, right? Some good YouTube videos and, being somewhat skilled with your hands, you could kind of figure out how to open these stores. So a lot of mom and pop shops open. And so the market got super competitive on that side of things. And so and I would say too, truthfully, I was 6-7 years in, this is 2016, 17 at this point. I was 6-7 years in as being a entrepreneur and somebody that loves to innovate and scale and grow businesses. I was kind of looking for something else to invest in, and my team was in a pretty good spot. And so with Genius, we ended up, letting our current team run that business, and ultimately decided it was best to exit and sell the business while the market was still in a pretty good position. And somebody else that wanted to put the time in to grow and scale it, because we felt like we had a really good foundation, great people, good systems and processes. And even though the market was a bit challenging, we thought somebody else would still want to grow it. So we decided to sell that business shortly after that. And then I jumped over, and some of my team as well jumped over to start growing Tech Defenders and scaling it at that point in time.
Okay, cool. I want to dive into EOS right after this short break. We'll be right back on the Clarity Advisors Show.
Is your business where you want it to be, or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-8255 2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
And welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. We're talking with entrepreneur Garry VonMyhr. And Garry, you'd mentioned EOS earlier. For those folks that don't know what that is, talk about EOS a little bit and traction and how you've applied that at Tech Defenders.
Right. So EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. Good amount of people have heard of it now. I used to say EOS and it was like 1 in 10, entrepreneurs would know about it. Now it seems like it's like 6 or 7 out of 10. So it's gained a lot of traction over the years. But, in short, it's a system for operating your business. And it's everything from people to weekly meetings to a good way to get your vision down on paper, cast that to your organization, set quarterly goals. They're called rocks in EOS terms, and quite a bit more. But it's a pretty robust system where I always tell people it's the best from a series of several books and best practices from other business leaders brought into one book. It's called the main book is called Traction. You'll hear a lot of people talk about that by Gino Wickman, but it's a bunch of best principles on how to run and operate your business and help it scale, specifically for, I would say, smaller, mid-sized businesses that are looking to grow. And so it's been a phenomenal tool for me over the years, and kind of self-implemented initially with Genius. Look back at some of my work there and it was like, man, we really missed the mark, but we got some of it, but now we full on have used a third-party implementer and coach over the last few years, and are like, we follow that system like 99 out of 100%. Like we're all in on it. It's been really great for us.
Yeah. And as far as growing a team, there's a specific acronym with Traction that I know you guys use. Talk about that a little bit and how that helps guide you in your hires and how you build your team and frankly, select the team, maybe some people that don't need to be on the team anymore. Is talk about how you think about that and how that works.
Yeah, one of the things I like a lot about EOS, and really when we went to the the implementer to help us put it in place properly, you build out kind of in the early stages of implementing the accountability chart, and that's really like an org chart on steroids. And so you take a look at the organization and say, hey, what are all the key roles and responsibilities we need to be successful? And you start with a leadership team first. And you build out the leadership team, and then you kind of build it down from there. After your leadership team, is kind of there to help guide and build out the rest of that process. But you don't look first at the people you have. You look first at what the organization needs to be successful. And a coach will help you through that, or mentor or advisor to help kind of walk you through that process, because it can be kind of terrifying as a first-time entrepreneur to know, hey, do I really need 3 or 4 high-level people? Do I need 1 or 2 people? What does everybody need to do? How can I afford all of that? So it can be a bit overwhelming, but so once you build out that accountability chart and you figure out exactly what the organization needs to be successful, you look at the people you have, and then what you do is you go through a process of, people analyzing. And I know it may sound a little bit harsh, but it's called the people analyzer. And it's a phenomenal tool to make sure you have the right people in the right seat. So, in EOS terms, RPRS, right people, meaning the right core value and cultural fit. And you have to obviously know your values and have them defined in order to make sure you've got the right people there. And then right seat, meaning they get it, want it, and then have capacity to do the those responsibilities well. And so and there's a sort of scoring system around it.
That G.W.C, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you guys use that phrase, right? You talk about G.W.C, the get it, want it, and have capacity.
Everybody knows in my organization, especially managers. I mean, probably even frontline employees as well now at this point, but definitely we talk about it all the time.
Yeah. And walk through each of those letters.
So I guess I would first start with saying, right people, keep in mind, right? So the right core values for us, we have 3 core values: find a way, elevate others, and see what you're capable of. Okay. And so that one is first. You have to have the right people before you get into right seat, right? If you don't have the right
Sure.
cultural fit, doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
I guess I just to circle back on that, you have to have that.
Yep.
And then
100%.
GWC is get it, want it, and capacity. So get it is really, I always talk about it. It's like your natural ability, your biochemical, your ability to natural God-given ability to do that job and that job function. Some people are, born to be really good with numbers. Other people are born to be really good leaders. And some are somewhere in the middle, and you could over time build up your capacity, your, physical, emotional, mental capacity, time capacity to do that job. So that's the third one. Want it is really, it's pretty obvious, but it's like, do you like display and like really want that job? Not say you want it, but demonstrate that you actually want it. So,
right.
So G, natural ability, and to get it there. W, want it, really actually 100% want that role. And then C, have the physical, mental, emotional, and time capacity to do that role and those roles and responsibilities. So.
Yeah, fantastic. And you use that and have used that to build the team at Tech Defenders. And if somebody doesn't fit the GWC, just because you have them on the team, if there's not a role or they're not fitting in, you need to do something different with them. Talk about how you do that.
Yeah. So the right cultural people, we try to always find the right seat for them in the organization, right? And as a growing company, new seats open up all the time, creating them, or other people are growing and going there. So it's quite a bit easier on the right cultural side as long as you're growing and have the seats. Otherwise, it can be a problem if you have a really good person, but you don't have the right seat for them too. So that can definitely happen at times as well. If somebody isn't, doesn't GWC the seat, obviously what we do, and this is, a big part of EOS as well, is there's a process, just typical, like a 3-strike process called the strike process, where you sit down and you analyze with them and take a look at the role, make sure it's clear, and look at the responsibilities of that role, and then communicate, and you work on a plan. I mean, a big part of EOS is having the right people in the organization and retaining them, certainly. And so you really want to get into a spot with EOS. And I think this is another key point that I've learned over time with some of the businesses. Without the right system, managers have a really hard time leading their employees, and especially early managers. And so for me, having this, EOS system and the strike process has allowed my managers to be better at managing and communicating to the employees, and really giving them the clear areas where they need to, the employee needs to step it up. And it kind of forces them to go through that, that right process that they need to go to, and the employee deserves to go to, you go through and really understand, hey, what is it? Where is it that I'm missing? Like what responsibility is it that I'm not meeting the bar on here? And let's dive into that. So it's been a great tool. And the employees in my organization understand the process, and they understand that, even though it's a strike process and it sounds a little bit harsh, it's a process to help get clarity on what they need to improve on, so they can be back in a really good, healthy spot in the organization and know where they're at. Right. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of times that's the hardest thing, is just like employees just want to know where they're at and have an opportunity, And the first time managers, they struggle with bridging that gap. They're usually a little bit afraid of that.
Right. Yeah. Well, feedback tends to be negative, and so we don't like to give it and we don't like to get it, but it doesn't have to be. It needs to be constructive. And if it's from the heart and meant to help the person, if you have it in your mind that you're there to help them, kind of whatever you say, they're going to take it well, because they know your intention. It's when the intention is to harm, or it's all about you and not about them, that they hear that too, regardless of the words. So yeah, you really want to care for the folks. And that's what I'm hearing you say, is we use this process, but we still care about people and want to get them to be their most successful. So,
totally. 100%. It's all about intention. If you have the right intention as a manager and leader, you're going to communicate it a lot better. The employee is going to believe in that. They're going to believe in the process and themselves. And then typically, and I've seen this happened several times where, you know, it ends up making that relationship even stronger, and that employee understands kind of where their weaknesses are, where they stand, and they feel really good, you know. I mean, maybe not in that moment, but pretty shortly after it comes back and it turns around, and they're feeling good.
Right, right. Well, yeah, people are people, and it's not that our employees are our kids, but it has some analogies to parenting. You always love and want the best for your kids, but sometimes you have to have difficult conversations with them, and sometimes they don't like the consequences of their actions, but you're always doing it from a place of love and caring to help them get better. And as parents, when we communicate it that way, it goes a lot better. And yeah, they don't always like it, but they know where you're coming from and what your intention is. And in the workplace, the same thing. As a manager and a leader, when you care about your team and want the best for them, well, they may not like what you're saying in the moment, like you said, but they know that where it's coming from, and in the long term, you can actually strengthen those relationships. I 100% agree.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the company that you created during the pandemic. I remember talking with you back then that you were about to launch this thing, and it was literally like what, March, April of 2020. Tell us about that a little bit, what the idea was, and how you decided to launch it when everything else is closing, you're opening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, this is definitely a kind of a fun story, and definitely happy to tell it. You know, it wasn't as much me launching it, and it's kind of similar to, I guess, really Jordan, my original partner with Genius Phone Repair, who had an idea, and then they were crazy enough to kind of bring me on early on to help bring that idea to light and make it happen. So in this case, it was a good friend of mine. His name is Nate Barr, and had worked several years in the healthcare system and worked his way all the way up to being a director of a local healthcare system here. And him and I have been good friends, and our families good friends for, you know, almost probably a decade at this point.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and what I love to do is to help other entrepreneurs make that leap, and from where they are to be able to start their business. And so I'm always like, kind of like poking and prodding at people that, you know, I think could be really good entrepreneurs. And eventually sometimes I can work them over to maybe to take that entrepreneurial leap from where they are. And so that was kind of the story to some degree with Nate. I knew he was an entrepreneur at heart, very sharp guy, tons of great ideas, great energy, passionate. And so Nate had an idea early on to, and this was, you know, at the start of the pandemic, there was a lot going on. And I remember with with Tech Defenders at the start of the pandemic, I kind of went to Nate as like my healthcare consultant, if you will. Like, hey, I see a lot of this stuff in the news, and, you know, talking to people, here's what I'm hearing, but like, give it to me straight. Well, you know, where are we at? What do we need to do? What kind of protocols do we need? And so I remember this was like February of 2020. My team was like looking at me really weird, but I brought Nate in kind of as a consultant to help us kind of prepare for what could come at that time. Actually, this might have been March, so it may have been closer to when things were happening, but certainly before that was like actually officially a pandemic. I said, hey, what kind of filtration do we need? How do we need to clean our surfaces? You know, what kind of protective measures could we make? And you know, I wanted to make sure my staff felt comfortable, you know, at work. And so Nate came in and had some ideas. And then, you know, fast forward a little bit, just like, you know, weeks back then, and it was, you know, mid-March, we actually fully launched EOS actually the same day that the schools got shut down in the US here, or in Michigan, sorry, I should say. So we launched EOS that same day. And then really shortly after that, and this was in April, Nate came to me with this idea and said, hey, look, I'm interested in kind of like using some of the nurses as kind of like contractors, and think of it like a Uber-like model of nursing for businesses to help them, you know, whether it's through the pandemic, or it could be long-term care facilities, could be schools, could be wherever, but nurses are the glue in the hospital. They do so much work there. A lot of times they work 3/12, so they've got available time. And, you know, he was a nurse as well. So he's like, I think this could be super successful. So his first customer was us at Tech Defenders. And, you know, he had a good network of nurses. And so he started to bring him on as 1099 contractors to do health and wellness screenings for us. And so they were doing mostly just temperature checks and basic questions and some of that sort of stuff at the start of the pandemic for us.
Okay.
And then it evolved into quite a bit more from there. But, throughout the pandemic, I mean, we started doing work with school districts, becoming really their whole school nursing program, and consulting with them around COVID. We started doing COVID testing for businesses. And then we started doing some testing and staffing for some of the long-term care facilities. And so business just took off and boomed. And I should say too, one important point was Nate actually lost his job 1 week after starting the business. Oh. And so, yeah, right. So it was and it wasn't because of starting the business, but it was an opportunity where it was like, okay, our backs are against the wall, or it was kind of like that moment where it's like, hey, burn the ships, right? We're all the way on the other side. There's no turning back now. Yeah. And so it was the burn the ships moment, but it wasn't like an option. It was like forced. And so we were all hands on deck at that point. So so we just hit the ground running, and and the name of that business is HealthBar, by the way. I should mention, but it's kind of how it got going initially there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, we'll put the company names and links in the show notes for folks who want to go check that out. And sure. So I know you're always learning and absorbing new information and trying to up your game and get better, pouring into yourself so you can pour into others and your team and those around you. What are you reading or listening to these days? What are a couple of books maybe that have caught your attention, or a podcast or something?
Yeah. So I listen to quite a few audiobooks. I try to listen to at least one every couple of weeks is my goal. And so if I can listen to 20, 25 a year, that puts me into a really good spot. Right now I'm listening to Hyper Sales Growth by Jack Daly. There was a lot of Jack Daly fans. I actually just kind of got introduced to him. It's been a great book. Obviously it sounds like just a sales book, right? Hyper Sales Growth, but it's quite a bit about culture and building a winning culture, specifically, I guess, sales culture through your organization. Sure. But that's a lot of what it starts out with, the fundamentals there of how Jack built a great culture, and then later on goes into specific sales techniques on managing, growing, and leading a team of successful salespeople.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one. I feel like I reference traction in the EOS book, like almost, I don't know, kind of comes back like every quarter. Yeah. And in some way I'll pop in, listen to a chapter or two, and there's a series of books there as well. Get a Grip is another book that's pretty good in that series. How to Be a Great Boss, phenomenal book. We're talking about leadership and management. It's really good, especially if you're using the EOS system. I mean, that really helps you connect that system to being a better manager at the same time. And so that's a phenomenal book. Not, you don't necessarily need to be on the system, but it helps to be on the system there. Those are a few of the recent ones I'm listening to. So. Yeah,
fantastic. Hey, listen, Garry, so appreciate having you on here. Tons of great stories and hearing about how you did some things and how you utilize traction to build your team and how you think about the team. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, I know you're always interested in business and you like talking business, and you've invested in a number of businesses. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So connect with me on there and shoot me a quick message. Love to connect with, early entrepreneurs, maybe he's trying to looking to scale, grow their business as well. Could be investors too. I'm doing a little bit of investing myself, so networking with other local investors here as well. But definitely LinkedIn, connect with me on there, engage with me, send me a message. And then, I'd love to connect outside of that for coffee or lunch or beer sometime.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, good. Well, again, thank you so much for being our guest today. Had a great time talking with you. And we'll put the links to your contact information, your LinkedIn, and those books you referenced all in the show notes. So with that, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Clarity Advisors Show, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors Show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.